some of Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians, he talks about this race analogy again. And he makes a statement. He said, don't you realize in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize, so run to win. This is huge right here, these last 4 words. So run to win. Run to win. What he's basically saying is don't stop. Run. Don't quit. Run to win. You see, there's a difference in running and running to win. Now, I'm going to be a little transparent with you for a moment this morning. When I was in elementary school, about 3rd through the 5th grade, they had a program called the Presidential Fitness Award. Anybody remember that? A few of you maybe. And what they did was every year in PE, all the students had to go through the Presidential Fitness Award deal. And that included you had to do so many sit-ups, so many push-ups, you had to run the 50-yard dash in X amount of time, and all these different feats that you had to go through. But one of the things they had in this Presidential Fitness Award was you had to run a 440. A 440. And you would have to run that, and if you ran it in a certain amount of time, then you got a certificate. And if you ran it in a good time, you got the Presidential Fitness Award certificate. And if you ran it in lesser times and completed it, you got a certificate of participation. Now, a lot of people, I've watched it, and when we were kids, a lot of people, they would start this race, and man, they were full guns blazing. I mean, they ran and they did fast times and because they wanted to be up there and get the right certificate, and they wanted to be first and wanted to have the best time and all that, and they ran hard. I ran simply to try to beat the bell for the next class. I thought if I can just finish in this one class period, the 440, I will be doing good. So I ran, and I didn't run to get the Presidential Award. I just ran so I could get a certificate of participation. I'm going to tell you, a lot has changed since elementary school because I don't like to lose. I don't like to just participate. If I'm going to play ball, I want to win. If I'm going to play basketball, I want to win. If I'm going to play softball, I want to win. If I'm going to run in a race, I want to win. If I'm playing cards, I want to win. If I'm playing Monopoly, I better win. I mean, I don't like losing. I'm not one of those guys who says, hey, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's how you play the game. That's not me, okay? That's not your pastor. I'm not that passive, just participation kind of guy. I want to win. I want to win. And so many people are running the race of life. They're running the race of faith simply to get a participation certificate. They're just running the race because I don't want to go to hell, so I'm just going to go through I'm going to run the race. We're giving minimum effort. We accept Jesus. We show up at church once a week. There's no growth. There's no involvement. There's no serving. There's no giving. There's no intensity. There's no passion to our lives. We don't want to run to win. We're just running to participate. We're just going through the motions. I don't want to get to the end of the race and stand before Jesus and realize I gave less than my best for the one who gave his all for me. So I want to run. I want to run toward the finish line. Focus on Jesus. Second thing is I want to give. I'm going to give my all. I want to finish strong. I don't want to just crawl over the finish line or just, well, I finally made it. I want to finish strong. I want to give it everything I have. And this is what Paul was talking about. He was talking to a younger person in this writing. And Paul had run. He had been there, done that, and he was writing to his younger protege, Timothy. And he said this, the time of my death is near. In other words, he said, Timothy, I've run my race, buddy. I can see the finish line. I'm that close. I'm near the end of my race. My death is near. I have fought the good fight. I finished the race, and I remained faithful. Doesn't matter what you've done in your past. No matter how bad you've messed up, don't let past defeats disqualify you from finishing well. It's not how you start a race, but it's how you finish it. And I can't think of a better example than Paul. Paul started out as Saul, in the Scripture. And his mission, his goal in life was to track down Christ followers, to arrest them, imprison them, and even execute Christ followers. You talking about a bad start to a race of faith? I mean, he was hunting down and killing Christians. It didn't start well for Saul, but he had this experience with God, and it changed his life and changed his name from Saul to Paul. And the end of his race was totally different than the beginning. He said, now I fought a good fight. I finished the race and I finished the course. Every marathon has what a runner calls the wall. This is very interesting. This week I got to looking at some articles and reading some articles about hitting the wall, is what they call it. And this is what it says. The article says to hit a wall, to come up against an obstacle that stops or impedes progress. Our project is going well, and we hit a wall and suddenly find our funding's been cut out for the project. We've hit a wall. To hit a wall is to reach a point where you are physically and mentally unable to make progress or to continue doing something. And we all hit walls in our life. You hit a wall at school. You hit a place in school that it's just like, man, I can't make any progress. I can't go any further. I'm stuck. We hit a wall in our finances. We just like, I just don't know what the next move's going to be. We're just at a standstill in our finance. You hit a wall in your marriage. It's like, man, things are just not going. We're not making progress in our marriage, and we hit walls in our life. We're very acquainted with walls. We hit walls in our job, with our finances, with our relationships, all kind of walls. And in a marathon, there's a moment that the runner hits a wall. Usually about halfway into the marathon, they hit a wall and every muscle in their body hurts. Their lungs are burning and their legs feel like noodles, and everything within them screams and cries out, quit, stop, don't go any further. You can't go any further. This is too much. It's not worth it. And at that moment, we hit a wall and we have to make a decision whether we will press beyond the wall or the wall will represent the end. In these articles I was reading, it was very interesting. I read one article and it said 7 ways to avoid hitting the marathon wall. I thought these were really interesting, and I'll just give them to you real quick. After hitting the wall, it said the first one is stick to your planned pace. If you're going to avoid hitting the wall, you got to have a pace. You got to set a pace that you're going to run at. The second one is avoid surges in pace. And so many people start out like guns blazing. They're just like, whoa. And all of a sudden they burn their energy out because they didn't pace themselves. And the next 3 are kind of grouped together. Load up on carbs, stay hydrated, and take carbs on the run. They're saying what you need to do is you need to get energy, you need to store it up, you need to keep hydrated, grab a protein bar or something on the run that you can keep your strength up as you run. And then number 6 was learn to burn fat as you run. Learn to get rid of what you don't need as you run. And then the last one, and I thought this one was interesting, we'll talk about it in a minute, but spectator strategy. You see, we can often hit walls spiritually when we're faced with adversity and we don't seem to be making any progress spiritually. We don't seem to be going anywhere spiritually, and suddenly we start doubting ourselves. We start doubting our faith. We start doubting God, and we wonder, is it really worth it? And when I read through these lists of things to keep from hitting the wall, I suddenly began to see some parallels in running our spiritual race and how to avoid hitting the wall in our spiritual race. I just want to give you just a few of them real quick. The first one was this: stick to a pace. We're not running a sprint, we're running a marathon. And a lot of people start out like wildfire, they burn out and end up in ashes. Pace yourself. Pace yourself, consistently doing the things that you know you need to do. We call these disciplines, spiritual discipline, doing the things that we know we need to do. And it may seem like everyone else is flying past you. Everyone else is more spiritual than you. Everyone else is deeper than you. And we often look at other people, at the way they're running, and we try to set our pace by their pace. Oh, they're spiritual. They read 10 chapters in their Bible every day. Oh, they're spiritual. They're running fast. They pray for an hour every day. They witness to all people everywhere. They serve all the time. Hey, they're part of 3 small groups. Or they have a bigger Bible than we do. And we compare our pace to someone else's pace. When we try to run at someone else's pace, we quickly burn out and we get frustrated. I read a story when I was probably in elementary school. I read it, I've heard it for many years now, and you probably have too. It's called The Story of the Tortoise and the Hare. And I'm going to give you the breakdown real quick, but they start out on a race. And the hare, he blazes off, leaves the tortoise in a cloud of dust. And within a moment, the tortoise can't even see the hare. He's so far down the racetrack and the pathway, he doesn't even see him anymore. And the tortoise just starts out. And he's just putting one foot in front of the other. And the hare's just blazing a trail. And finally, he looks back in his wake, and he doesn't see the tortoise anywhere. And he's like, man, I'm so far ahead. I've got this in the bag, man. I know the finish line's just ahead. I've gone so fast, I think I'm just going to take a rest. And, I deserved it. I've been making such progress. And he takes a nap. And during that nap, that tortoise is still just one foot in front of the other. Until finally the hare wakes up and he realizes the tortoise has passed him. And you know the story, the tortoise wins the race. I've read that story many times. I've heard that story many times. And you know what? Every single time I've read it or I've heard it, guess what? The tortoise always wins the race. Why? He paced himself. If we're going to break through the wall, the barriers in our spiritual race, then we got to stick to a pace. Got to have consistency, discipline. The second thing we need to do is we need to tend our souls. Tend to our souls. Just as the runner needs the carbs and the hydration in their body, we need the Word of God and the Spirit of God for our souls. In fact, Jesus made the statement, He said, man cannot live by bread alone. Man cannot live by just having physical bread, He said, but he will live and be nourished by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And living in this culture and world that we live in, it places a constant strain and drain on our souls. We face a very real enemy. We face someone who's out to derail us, to sidetrack us from finishing strong and finishing the race that we're in. The Scripture says that our enemy is like a roaring lion, and he has a goal, and that is to destroy and to devour you. We're fighting a spiritual battle. It's not a physical, but a spiritual thing. It's one thing to be tired and exhausted physically, but when our souls are exhausted, when our souls are depleted, we're an easy target for the enemy's attacks. When our soul is weak, and when my soul is weak, and I'm tired and I'm depleted, that's when I find that I'm most prone to temptation, to give in to temptation, to be depressed, to be self-centered, to simply be overwhelmed. That usually happens when I get busy and I neglect to tend my soul. When I think, hey, I'm doing good, hey, I'm strong, everything's going great, I'm close to God, and I can go for an extended period without replenishing and tending my soul. And that's why Jesus taught us this principle. He said in a prayer that He taught His followers, He said, teach us to pray. And He said to pray, give us today daily bread. Daily nourishment. He knew that we needed daily nourishment in order to finish strong. And maybe that's why He told His people, Israel, when they were delivered from Egypt and they started this journey to the Promised Land, and God miraculously would feed them every day. He would send them food. He'd rain it down out of heaven, and He would give them food to eat, but He would only give them food for the day. And He said, if you go out and you try to gather up more than you need and store up and hoard up, He said, it'll spoil, it'll ruin. Maybe what He was trying to teach His people was, hey, gather daily food. Because if you gather more than that, then you're going to think, well, I can skip gathering today because I got some saved up. And we tend to do that. We tend to not get daily food because we're doing good and we've got some stored up. He said you need daily food. Tend your soul. The next one is, and I just thought this was very interesting, lose the fat. Lose the fat. Listen to the words of Hebrews. The writer says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge cloud of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sins that so easily trip us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. And I love the paraphrase of the Message, and that's where we get this phrase right here. He said, strip down, start running, never quit. No extra spiritual fat. No parasitic sin. Two things he mentioned in this passage. He said, number one is strip off the sins. Strip off the sins. Sins begin as little things that are not addressed and attended, and soon they become big things in our life. And he said, you got to strip off the sin. Paul's advice, he said, strip them off. Confess them, turn from them, and cast them aside. And we know, we probably know what sins are weighing us down right now. And he said, you need to strip them off. You need to confess them so that you can run freely. So the first one, he said, strip off the sins. The second one is strip off the spiritual fat. Did you know that we can carry around so much spiritual fat that it weighs us down and it renders us ineffective? The old saying is true. For many of us, we know far more than we are actually practicing. For others, we think of, all we think of is feed me, give me more, I need more. And if we're not careful, we can become so spiritually overweight that we'd rather sit at the table than to go out and do and practice what we already know. We'd rather sit and eat than serve others. We'd rather be fed than feed others. We look for the next meal rather than looking for the lost. And if we're going to finish well, we need to be lean followers of God in pursuit of God and others. In other words, we need to be filling up. Yeah, we need to be fed, but then we need to pour out. Fill up and pour out. Fill up and pour out. Great analogy of this is the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee is teeming with life. It's beautiful. It has an inlet that allows water to flow into the sea, and it has outlets that keeps the water fresh and flowing. The Dead Sea, on the other hand, has an inlet that flows into it, but the Dead Sea is dead. It's lifeless. It's stagnant. It has an odor to it because it is fed and sourced, but it has no outflow to it. And that's so typical of us as Christ followers. Sometimes we can be so fed and so fed and so fed. If we're not giving and we're not flowing and we're not giving out of what God's giving us, we become stagnant. We develop an odor that repels rather than attracts people to Christ. And then the last thing, if we're going to get past the wall, and this is the one that intrigued me, was spectator factor. Here's the quote from the article. It says, hitting the wall is generally thought of as a physiological condition, but there's evidence to suggest it also has a psychological component too. As physical fatigue sets in, the brain's production of dopamine, which generates feelings of motivation and excitement, it begins to drop. This can cause doubt, and it can cause where we hear voices in our head telling us, you can't do this. It goes on to say, if your family and friends are coming along to watch you run this race, arrange them to be at certain points of the course where you think you might need a boost. Maybe that's why the writer of Hebrews 12, maybe that's what he was talking about when he wrote these words. Since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. I love the way the Message paraphrases this. And it says this, do you see what this all means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, all these veterans cheering us on. It means that we had better get on with it. He says there's a heavenly crowd that watches us as we run. People who blaze the trail, people who've gone on before us, people who have run this race And they've won. They finished strong. In Hebrews 11, he gives us a glimpse of this crowd. It's men and women who've already run the race. They hit the wall in their lives, and they hit a place that they didn't think they could get past, but they got past it, and they finished strong. And the stories in Hebrews 11 is their way of cheering us on. We read their stories, and it's each of them saying, yeah, we faced obstacles. Yeah, we faced hardships. Yeah, it wasn't easy. Yes, it was difficult, but we kept running. It's worth it. You can make it too. Don't give up. Keep the faith and keep running. We need that heavenly crowd. We need to read those words over and over again as they cheer us on. But there's something else. There's not just a heavenly crowd. There's an earthly crowd. Those who are currently around us. We need them. In that same book, the same writer of Hebrews, he wrote these words in Hebrews 10. He said, let us think of ways to what? Motivate one another to acts of love and to good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that we know the day of His return is drawing near. He said, motivate one another, encourage one another as you near the end of this race. What would happen if we simply took this passage today seriously? If we just devoted ourselves to the task of getting together, motivating and encouraging one another through acts of love and good deeds to not give up, to keep running, to finish strong. I tell you what would happen. I think we'd see a lot more people in the race, and we'd see a lot more people running strong and finishing well. We'd see a lot more people making the most of whatever time they had left, living each day to the fullest and running with all they have to finish the race. You say, so why run? I mean, why do we need to finish strong? Why do we need to run this race and give it everything and try to finish strong? The reason we need to run and we try to give it our all and finish strong is simply for this. It's because for the one who ran and finished strong, for you, for me. I want to go back as we wrap up and look at this passage one more time in Hebrews of what he's saying. He said, keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race we're in. Study how He did it. And then he goes on, he said, because he never lost sight of where he was heading, that exhilarating finish in and with God, and he could put up with anything along the way. The cross, the shame, whatever. And so now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God. And I love this last part of this verse. He says this, he said, when you find yourselves flagging in your faith, go over the story again, item by item, the long series of hostility that Jesus plowed through. And he said, that will shoot adrenaline into your soul. When you keep your eyes focused on Him, study how He ran, study how He did it. He said, when you're reminded of all that He endured, he said, when you read through that story, one translation said, so you won't become weary and give up. I love to see little kids as they're learning to walk. In fact, I was watching Ada this morning before church. And her grandmama was in the back, and she had her on the floor, and she was, she's doing the little toddler thing. And she was weebling and wobbling and had those hands out, and she's smiling. And she wasn't going necessarily in a straight line, but she was getting there. She was making progress. She was moving forward. You may be a little wobbly in your race. You may be a little wobbly in your walk. You may be teetering a little bit back and forth, and maybe a step forward and a step back and 2 steps forward, but you're moving forward. And just as little Ada was moving forward toward the outstretched arms of Grandmama, we run toward the outstretched arms of our Savior, our Lord. That's why we run to the finish line. He's beckoning us, come on, run. Give it everything. You're almost here. Just keep running, and you may get tired, and you may become weary, and you may get fatigued, and you may get distracted, but He's saying, hey, look at me, watch me, keep your eyes on me, and you run with everything that you've got. Run to me. I get tired when I think of a marathon. I've never run one, never desire to run one. All that running, it's overwhelming to me in a long distance. And sometimes we think of following Christ and running our race of faith, and we're thinking way down the road, and we're thinking, oh man, this is just so long and so hard. But what if we just ran for today? What if we just ran for today? What if we just focused on the finish line, on Jesus today? What if we just ran today and the goal of the day was just, I want to run today and I want to get to the end of this day and finish strong? And what if we got up tomorrow and we did the same thing and we said, I just want to run today with everything that I have. I want to run today and I want to keep my eyes focused on the finish line, and I want to give my best today so that when I get to bed tonight and I lay my head on my pillow tonight, that I could just exhale and maybe under my breath just say these words, I fought a good fight today. I finished the race and I kept the faith today. And tomorrow I'll get up and run again, the Lord willing. What if instead of living life like we had 30 days to live, what if we just lived as though today was our last day? And we ran to win today with a goal of finishing strong today. What if we ran today with the purpose of hearing the one who ran for us? The one who not only ran for us, who didn't hit a wall, He hit a cross to show His love and His grace and His forgiveness to us. What if we ran today simply to hear Him say, well done, you ran well. And that's how I want to live each day. That's how I want to live each day. I want to run straight and I want to run strong. And I want to know when that day is in the books that I could say with a sincere heart, I ran hard today. I fought a good fight. I kept my faith. I finished the course today. And I can lay my head down at night and know all is well. Father, I thank You for Your word. I thank You for the challenge of Your word. There's some in the room this morning, Father, that haven't even gotten in the race. They're still watching from the stands, and I pray today will be the day. Today would be the day, God, that they would say, it's time. It's time to give my whole heart to Christ. It's time to enter this race of faith and start running toward the finish line. I pray for those today that they'll make that decision. I pray for those that are in the room today that they've been running this race and they're tired. They've been distracted. They're all over the course. They're burning up energy. And they're beginning to doubt and question themselves and God and this whole faith thing. I pray today will be the day, God, that they get their eyes focused back on You, not on people, not on church, but they get their eyes focused on You and start running straight toward You, getting daily nourishment from You. Father, I pray that You'd give us the courage and the strength today to do what we know we need to do with what we've heard today. And we ask this in Christ's name.